During the period of Alan Wake's release, Remedy was dabbling in various forms of media to tie into the project. While this is a fun way to keep the fanbase occupied and investigating, there is a victim that came from this method. For anyone who did not leave the game to investigate the other content, this extra story was missed entirely. The only narrative consumed was what was only in the game itself. As a result, some characterization of one of the story's lead antagonists was lost. Agent Robert Nightingale has been a punching bag and labeled as a flat antagonist, the drunk, rogue FBI agent with a vendetta against the titular writer. He comes in, causes a few problems, nearly kills Alan on multiple occasions, then is ripped out of the story as quickly as he came into it. It can leave many asking, other than being an inconvenience, what was the point of Nightingale? Unfortunately, all of his backstory, emotional journey, and motivations is absent from the game. So much so that over the course of writing his book, Clay made a Freedom of Information Act request for any information about him. Despite being unproductive, I'll read it here because of the potential open plot threads it brings up.
We cannot furnish records related to Special Agent Nightingale as they remain classified due to the ongoing investigation of an unrelated matter. I can inform you, however, that Agent Nightingale is no longer employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Over 13 months ago, Agent Nightingale's partner was killed in the line of duty. The trauma related to this event triggered a severe mental breakdown and the subsequent substance abuse problem you refer to in your correspondence. Our records indicate that he ventured to Bright Falls following his discharge from the Bureau, but we have no knowledge of and bear no responsibility for his activities there. Furthermore, we have no files relating to shadow men, lake creatures, ravenous crows, or any of the other bizarre supernatural fauna you describe. Bob Nightingale was a solid and dependable agent who was not able to overcome his tragic circumstances. His current whereabouts remain unknown.
This letter was written by the Section Chief of Records and Information named Pablo Rovira Diaz. What is this ongoing investigation that is apparently related to an unrelated matter? I see a few possibilities. It sounds as though someone else at the Bureau may be investigating something tangentially related. This could potentially be FBI agent Alex Casey and Saga Anderson, since they are looking into Alan Wake's disappearance. Or it could be a lie, and Diaz is a plant working under Alberto Tomasi from the Federal Bureau of Control, positioned to block any information regarding paranormal phenomenon. Either way, this was a dead end for Clay. Luckily, when he checked into room 2 of the Majestic Motel, he uncovered Agent Nightingale's notes, audio recordings, and personal journals. As the librarian from Wisconsin pored over all the details, Clay came to an opposite conclusion than those who simply played the game. So what did he find? What secrets about the broken agent did he uncover? Let's go back to the beginning and go chronologically, showing the descent of the man from a model agent to a broken drunk. Back in the day, Robert Nightingale was considered one of the FBI's best. Along with his partner Finn, they were called the Righteous Brothers because they never drank and always followed the rules. This changed when Finn began to have problems. Insane ramblings about darkness and developing a fear for shadows. Nightingale initially believed it was simply the stresses of the job expressing themselves. It eventually led to Finn's death. In room 2 of the Majestic, Clay Steward found handwritten journals. On the 4th day of being in Bright Falls, Nightingale wrote this.
A partner isn't like a coworker or a friend or even a brother. He's your guardian, your keeper, your other wife. He keeps you on the dead straight, calls you on everything the others let slide, and he has your back when the shooting starts. That's where I failed Finn. I owe it to him to keep going even when everything's gone dark. When the craziness back east started, he couldn't explain it either. That's when he needed me the most, but I blew it. I have to make it right.
After this, Robert fell into the bottle and eventually began to have nightmares just like Clay. In them, there was a man who looked like Wake. This became the spark which fueled his paranoia about the writer. From Agent Nightingale's perspective, he failed to provide proper support for his partner and friend. All he knew was that he was dreaming of dark things and Alan Wake was involved. Clay saw these dreams in one way, and Nightingale perceived them in a completely different light. In a certain sense, we can make the argument that Robert Nightingale is dealing with a form of survivor syndrome, more commonly known as survivor's guilt. He regrets not being there to support his partner, wondering if there was something he should have done to help. If we skip ahead a bit, we can apply symptoms of survivor syndrome to his behavior. Mood swings and angry outbursts. Check. Irritability. Check. Obsessive thoughts about the event. Check. Flashbacks of the traumatic event. Check. Feelings of helplessness. Check. It is almost a cruel irony that one symptom is helplessness, and Agent Nightingale ends up becoming a character in Departure by Alan Wake, playing out the script as written, something he is helpless to fight against. His obsession with the initial traumatic event ends up forcing him into a feedback loop of flawed logic called hindsight bias. This is the tendency to perceive past events as being more predictable than they really were. It is a method to try and feel like we had some form of control over chaotic events. We tell ourselves there must have been some way to prevent this tragedy. Then we go out of our way to figure out what those things were. Then we spend hours trying to figure out how we should have behaved differently, berating ourselves or others for acting outside this optimal path. It is a common thing to look back upon past events and think, well, that person was dumb, he should have turned left instead of turning right, applying your own sense of logic and morality to situations that occurred long ago. Situations that should have gone the other way based upon the information you are now privy to. If they did, things would have turned out better. However, the people in question were not privy to the same information. Decisions in the moment don't have the benefit of hindsight. It is why many of us make so many mistakes. If we knew how the quantum ripples would express themselves when we cast a pebble into the world, we would make very different decisions. Agent Robert Nightingale is obsessed with what he could have done. Darkness, Alan Wake, how did all this fit together to drive his partner insane and lead to his death? Whatever the connection was, he would not let it happen again. In hindsight, he believes Alan was responsible somehow, so he will not allow the writer to do it again. He will stop him by any means necessary. While in the process of rationalizing this entire scenario, the last remaining righteous brother became corrupted. He hit the bottle hard, falling into the bottom of it, becoming erratic and eventually being fired from the FBI. This was the last pebble that caused him to leave and head to Washington. One way or another, he would remove the source of his obsession, the individual responsible for the domino of destruction in his life, Alan Wake. This led him to Bright Falls. A good portion of what we know after Nightingale's arrival in Episode 3 of the game is from the perspective of Alan or manuscript pages. However, let's look at it from the agent's perspective. This seems like a good place to discuss some cut content of the game. Remedy has a habit of attempting to include multiple playable characters in their games. In Max Payne 2, we briefly take over for Mona Sachs and see the world from her eyes. In Quantum Break, we assume the role of the primary antagonist, Paul Serene. Originally, Remedy also intended us to have sections playing as Beth Wilder, but that was cut. In Alan Wake, there were plans to have Agent Nightingale as a playable character. This would have allowed the player to get an insight into his internal struggles in the same way we do with Alan. His story would have involved him and Finn coming to Bright Falls in search of Alan together. We do not know if this was because he was a missing person or for another reason. Either way, during the course of the Righteous Brothers' time in Bright Falls, Finn was going to be taken and become a boss battle for Agent Nightingale to fight. During early development, all of this was scrapped, and instead the backstory condensed down to what we just discussed. But it goes to show that Remedy put far more thought into the character than the players got to experience. With the backstory out of the way, let's fast forward to Nightingale's time in Bright Falls. Largely, the information we get is based upon two things Clay Steward uncovered: handwritten journals and recordings the disgraced agent made of interviews he conducted. Let's start with the journals. Upon arriving, it became quickly apparent that Nightingale was both distrustful of and felt superior to the locals of this small town, likely prejudicial thoughts of someone from a big city meeting people from small town America. After meeting Sheriff Breaker, he immediately presumes that she knows diddly squat about anything. This sentiment is broadened to the townspeople as a whole in the afternoon of his second day in Bright Falls. In his own words,
"Do these people even know what they're dealing with here? Good God, it's like watching toddlers play with nitro."
Earlier that day, he muses on whether he should use honey or salt to manipulate the sheriff into helping, believing that Sarah is pliable and easy to twist around for information. All of these presuppositions are completely false, as he will soon learn. As time went on, Nightingale transitioned from dismissing the locals to creating a fiction in his head that they were all involved in whatever Wake was doing, that they knew something and refused to tell him. Little by little, his paranoia grew, as we will see in the interviews he performed. This would only compound his anxiety about Alan as a suspect in whatever otherworldly crime he was focused on. When any of us are so focused on a single goal, anything that interferes, whether actively or passively, can be an irritation. Depending on your mindset, we can warp these interferences as actively antagonistic to our goals, whether true or imagined. Nightingale was feeling this. Combine this with being in unfamiliar surroundings, and he very likely felt like he was behind enemy lines. Every face that glances his way, either a conspirator or a future victim. Based upon his rocky mental state and his near constant state of intoxication, this all fueled his instability. Let's poke our heads around the interviews to get some examples. Out in Elderwood National Park, Nightingale bumped into Mott. Secretly recording the conversation, he began questioning the man. Let's read a couple lines of this interview.
You see anything weird here about this guy, Alan Wake? He's not in his cabin. You know where he is. Have you seen him? You should leave this whole thing alone. You don't know what you're messing with.
He continues on to insult the former agent. Mott leaves into the woods, leaving the other man frustrated and angry. The earlier comment by Mott informs Nightingale that some people knew about the situation with Wake, but refused to tell him. This shows up again during his interview with Pat Maine. The day after nearly shooting the radio host, Agent Nightingale sat down with him to talk.
I did wonder if he had anything to do with the situation at the trailer park, but it seems so unlikely. I suppose I was wrong about that. Even so, I really can't imagine that anything Mr. Wake has done could be worth all of this effort. You probably can't. Me? I don't have to imagine. That sounds ominous. It is ominous, Mr. Maine. Trust me on that. It's no joke. I've seen things you would not believe. You should consider the possibility that your experience doesn't make you an expert or improve your judgment. It may not make you as unique as you think.
When pressed about this last comment, Maine simply responds that he is not prepared to discuss it with the agent due to lack of trust. Being a second example of the citizens of Bright Falls withholding information from him, it amplifies his paranoia and mistrust. This further deepens after his conversation with Dr. Hartman. Driving to the gates of Cauldron Lake Lodge, he tries to bully his way inside. Unfortunately for him, Hartman has a different disposition than the others. During this conversation, the doctor began to record it in case he needed to use it in a legal battle later.
Not buying that. I was tailing Wheeler, and this is the only place he could have gone. That means Wake is probably there too!
Agent Nightingale, this is private property, and I will not allow you to disturb my patients.
Yeah? I can get a warrant. How would your fragile little patients like that?
Oh, I'm thoroughly intimidated by your mighty authority now, Agent.
Listen, you smug snob. How would you like it if I busted through this gate and knocked you around a little?
Agent Nightingale, first of all, I'm recording this conversation, so you might want to watch what you say. Secondly, you're not dealing with a hick now. I know the law, and if you can get a judge to grant a warrant, I'll be glad to cooperate. But you won't get one. Be advised that any further communications with me are to be made through my lawyer.
I don't believe this.
Good day, Agent.
Yeah.
This is the most egregious example of antagonism over the course of his investigation, and does nothing to help his self-righteous crusade. We must keep in mind that Agent Nightingale believes Alan is dangerous and has caused various deaths, one of which being his partner. Despite having no legal authority, he feels justified in hunting the writer down with maniacal fervor. If he doesn't, he believes more will die. For him, the end justifies the means. Two other interviews involve Randall, the manager of the trailer park, and Barry Wheeler. With the former, he was cordial and simply looked to extract information. For Barry, he was aggressive. During the conversation, he both accuses the other of hiding Wake and also having an affair with Alice. In the agent's head, this gave Wheeler motive. At this point, he is concocting wild fantasies to fit his presuppositions. The final interview shows a moment of clarity outside of his mania. Clay mentions that this may be the closest to the real person we see of him. A compassionate man peeks out from behind the booze. After the incident in her trailer park leaves Rose Marigold semi-catatonic, she is taken back for questioning. At the start, Nightingale treats her as hostile just like the others. However, as she freaks out more and more, talking of the woman in black and having a mental break, the agent's demeanor softens. As she cradles herself, crying, he moves to soothe and comfort her. finally treating her like a victim and not some cog in a grand conspiracy, apologizing and trying to help her through the episode. Sadly, moments of humanity like this are never repeated again. From here, we know the story. Nightingale chases Alan throughout episode 3, catches up with him at the Anderson farm in episode 4, then, at the start of episode 5, he is taken by the Dark Presence. With everything I just mentioned in mind, let's have a short defense of Agent Robert Nightingale. He lost his partner and best friend and had reason to believe Alan Wake was involved somehow. He began to drink heavily and lost his job. Any sense of purpose his job gave him was lost. From here, his only purpose was to catch up to the man responsible for his tragedy, the crime novelist. Upon locating the place Wake was staying, all of the townspeople either obfuscated his target's whereabouts or teased him a mystery that they were privy to and would not let him in on. This fueled his paranoia and made him even more determined to find the author. With his impulses affected by booze, his judgment was clouded. After locating manuscript pages that detailed events of the future, he saw this as two things: a manifesto for what crimes Alan planned to commit, and some form of supernatural influence that Finn mentioned to him before his death. For several nights in Bright Falls, he listened to weird noises all around the woods, getting louder each night. His entire mentality can be summed up in his journal on the night of the 4th day.
Going for a drive. Can't think in here. Am I going down like Finn? Not if I shoot first.
Self-preservation became a factor. He saw Finn go down this road and it ended badly. On one page, he saw his own death. With this context, his actions can be interpreted as a way to save himself, but also save everyone he believed Wake intended to harm. Even though we know there's a lot more to the story that Nightingale is not privy to, if we are honest, we can understand his perspective. In a different game, we may have been able to play Nightingale as the protagonist being caught up in some supernatural mystery. Without Alan's point of view, we may even have agreed with him, despite wishing him to be better about his methods. It is only by knowing the whole story that we know he was in the wrong, but this is itself a form of hindsight bias that the player has engaged in. We can only judge him with hindsight of the full story, not the small slice of the pie Nightingale is aware of. The greatest thing to keep in mind is the last choice he ever made. With his mind clouded by alcohol, anxiety, fear, and the belief he is justified in his actions, Robert stood over an unconscious Alan Wake. Hidden away in the Anderson brothers' cabin, he held a gun to the writer's head and tried to muster the courage to end it all now. One simple trigger pull, and the nightmare he had been experiencing could all go away.
Agent Nightingale stared at the passed-out writer. The man was sleeping off one hell of a night. Nightingale felt a stab of envy at Wake's oblivion, but he had a job to do. He put the gun to Wake's head and almost became a murderer. His hand shook and his throat felt tight and dry. Biting his teeth, he tried again to pull the trigger. He lost the nerve. Wake stirred. Nightingale would have to settle for an arrest.
I wrote it. It's my fault.
That's right, James Joyce. It's your fault and you're gonna pay for it.
When Nightingale was at his psychological and emotional weakest, he still found a way to defeat his darkest impulses. The easy way out of his tortured circumstance. To both avenge his partner and prevent further horror in the future. He did the right thing and did not become a murderer. This is the event we should all focus on. If he was an irredeemable character, the story for Alan would have ended there. But he managed to find some small grain of the righteous brother he lost and keep the demons of vengeance locked away, not letting it control him. In stark contrast, Alan Wake has horrible impulse control on the best of days. We hear stories of him assaulting people on the street, breaking Hartman's nose simply because he spoke to Alice, and various other examples. If this were the other way around and Alan truly believed Nightingale was responsible for all the misfortune that befell him, do you think he could control that inner demon? If Alan was put through the same trials as Nightingale, would he have put the gun away, or go through with it? Despite being a frustrating and seemingly irrational antagonist throughout the game, Nightingale is far more complex than he is given credit for. Just another tortured soul caught up in departure. A question does arise in relation to this. Would Nightingale have descended so far if departure was never written? Maybe he would have remained in his home city and joined an anonymous group. received a support system that helped him turn his life around before rejoining the FBI as the morally virtuous man he was before the trauma. The powers of the Dark Place allow Alan to take existing people, cast them as characters, and then move them to the proper points of the story. This begs the question, where is the moral component of such power? Maybe Carl, Stuckey, and Rusty would still be alive if it were not for him. Maybe Rose would never have suffered a mental break. Maybe an untold number of citizens would never have gone missing. Maybe Agent Nightingale would have found help and become a positive force rather than a twisted and broken man taken by the Dark Presence.
In the aftermath of the Bright Falls AWE, the story of Agent Robert Nightingale met a dark end. But his legacy appears to live on. 13 years later, another team of FBI agents is deployed to the Washington town to investigate what happened to Nightingale. One of which appears to be a figure manifested by Alan's writing to fulfill this task. If the return trailer is any guide, we may already know how this agent's time in Bright Falls will end. Based upon everything we have learned about Nightingale and everything we suspect about Agent Casey, a question must be asked. Where does Alan fit in morally to all of this? Does he bear any responsibility for how things turned out as a result of his reality-altering ability? In the next episode for this series, we will discuss this theme. What is the morality of creation? Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and subscribe to receive updates on future uploads. If you would like to help support the channel, a Patreon has been set up and the link is in the description below. Have a great day and peace be with you all.